Okay, the other side of the fence from Barney Curley we talked about in the last part would be bookmakers. Barry Dennis, friend of yours?
Yeah, he is a friend of mine. I'm proud to say he is. He's been very, very kind to me. Hard man, ruthless man. He's become a great money lender to some of my press room colleagues. If they all turned up with the if he turned up with all the bouncing checks that he's got and all the rest of it, I mean, we'd all have, you know, he's a hard man, but beneath it all, I knew, of course, of him. But I was at Royal Ascot one year, and a pal of mine said, "You must go down into the Silver Ring," and I thought, really? I had all the top hat and tails on. I thought, really? Well, I really want to go down there on a boiling hot day? He said, "You ought to go down there. Position number 71. Well, that's halfway back to Windsor, you know. And I went through all the betting ring, all through the members, through the betting ring. There was the Silver Ring, and at the far end there was hardly anybody behind him. Was this man with the green thing? You remember the green thing? He's still got Barry Dennis, and there was a sign, and it said, "No dogs, no women." And Arthur Edwards, the Sun Royal photographer, who I dragged down there, and he was probably the low life of his life, and he was supposed to be taking pictures of everybody else on earth. But I said, "Take a picture of that," and he took a picture, and we put it in the Sun on the weekend. And I said, "Barry, Claude Duval." "Yeah, what do you want?" "Well, you know." So I said, "Why this?" He said, "I'm fed up with these little women coming out. They go racing once every 10 years, and some little woman's come up to me and said, 'Can I have 2 shillings each way, Leicester Piggott?' You know, this is the Royal Hunt Cup, 20, 30 runners." And he said, "I've had enough of all this, so I don't want any dogs, and I don't want any stupid women." And that led to him getting a column in the Sun. He's a very generous man. You wouldn't believe. I told the story when my son ran in a charity race for cancer research at his school when he was at school at Cranbrook, and I said to Barry, he's running in a 15-mile race. Could you sponsor him for a 5 or a mile or whatever? And he said, "What's it for?" I said, "It's for cancer research." "Give Claude 250 quid. And I said, no. I said, that's going to be lopsided. Anyway, the money came out, and I put it all in. And James, out of sort of 600 kids who took part in this, he raised more money than anybody. But of course, he raised £295, and the headmaster sort of called him up in front of the whole school and shook his hand. What nobody realised was that one man had paid the 250. Now, I've had endless ones with Barry. As I say, he's a generous man. You know, he had a heart attack not that long ago. I saw him in Barbados earlier this year for the Test match. He's always been a big Essex fan. He's always been a big Spurs fan. No, I like him. He's completely self-made. When he started his column in the Sun, somebody rang me and he said, "You know, you keep saying this is the voice of the ring and you're building him up, pictures here, there. Now he's got doing the Bismarck on the morning line. You've created this monster. Do you realise he's warned off from Romford dogs?" I said, "What's that got to do with it?" "Oh, he's warned off for life, for fighting." I said, "That's got nothing to do with me. It's got nothing, dare I say, it's got nothing to do with you." And I blagged this bloke right off. I told him exactly where he could go. And I had to make check with Barry. I said, "Is that true, that story?" "Yeah, a long time ago, CD, long time ago," and all the rest of it. No, I like him. He's a good man.
Now, another person that you've got a lot of affection for, from what I can gather from reading your excellent book, Moments in the Sun, Martin Pipe.
MC Pipe, yes. He is a man. All the people in racing who I've loved, I love the people who weren't silver spoon merchants. All right, you're going to say Martin Pipe's father was a bookmaker. He left him millions and all the rest of it. But he knew nothing, Martin knew nothing about horse racing and training when he started. And he built it up, trained over 4,000 winners, champion trainer numerous times, broke all, they had to rewrite the record books because of MC Pipe. I stood on the stairs in the press room when Baron Blakeney won the Triumph Hurdle, big price, and I was with my lifelong friend Chris Poole, and he nudged me. He said, "CD, who's this bloody MC Pipe?" And I said, "I've never heard of him." But then, of course, we became aware that he was revolutionising the game with this training methods. I got to know him very, very. I'd love to have written a book either with him or about him. That's one of my regrets. I used to go down there and see him. I've forgotten when it was, when there was a dreadful thing called the Cook Report. Do you remember that? Mm. And they did all these sort of second-hand car salesmen, drugs, spibs, and in the end of it all, they had Martin Pipe, the champion trainer, and his turnover of horses, the mortality and all the rest of it. And it absolutely destroyed Martin. And, you know, he sought advice how to act in front of cameras. But I remember Ginger McCain and Mrs. Monica Dickinson and various other people, and they all slagged him off. And he was, in everything but name, he was accused of what we call blood doping horses, taking blood out, putting it back in, etc., etc. And this program came out, and I said to the then Sun racing editor, I said, I want a half page. I'm going to watch this program, and I'll be straight on the old piano, and I'll tap out a piece. And we had the Sun headline, which is in my book, and it says, "Carry on, Martin," because he was completely proved. You know, nothing was proved against him. He still rings me on my birthday. I hear this squeaky voice on my mobile. "Hello, happy birthday to you," and all the rest of it. He's an amazing character. Carol, who's his wife, who I think is lovely, and she said to me probably the best quote I've ever heard about her dear husband Martin Pipe, CBE or MVE. I always get it wrong, and she corrects me, but the tragedy of that man is that he never trusted anybody in racing. He created this great aura of being the greatest trainer, but he didn't trust anybody because he was an outsider. Right, his father was a bookmaker and all the rest of it, but he was an outsider. He learned everything from inside, and it's a sadness that he's never. He went, you know, I have to say, when I started, and he was, as I say, after Baron Blakeney, then things took off. And he was very tricky. He'd never give you a straight answer. At the races, you could ask him any question. He'd never give you a straight answer. Because he was secretive. Because they were punters, basically. And they were setting things up for gambles. But slowly, I supported him over that Cook report and said it was absolute rubbish. And he sent me a lovely invitation to go down to Nicholas Shane with my wife for a Sunday lunch party. And my wife said, "Oh, all the way down there, it's halfway to Cornwall." I said, "Well, I'm just honoured that I asked people in the press room, and I thought, Christ, there's hardly anybody being asked." And I drove down there, and I got there, turned into the famous Nicholas Shane, and there was Barry Cope's fish car van there. And I said, "We're all right now." I knew we were going to get the lobsters and all the rest of it. And he was so thrilled that the people who'd stuck by him, his best friends in racing are his oldest friends. I suggest he hasn't got many new friends. These are people who knew him when he started. And, all right, he's pulled off a few stunts and tremendous gambles. And I had run-ins with him when he wouldn't give me a straight answer. But I can't have done too much wrong, because I still get the old squeaky voice on the 6th of June every year. Because, interesting enough, here's a quiz question for you. Martin Pipe, Richard Hannon and myself were born within 6 days of each other in 1945. And he loves all that, you know. One day, I'd love to have a lunch somewhere in London. Have to be in London. I never get down there. With Hannon Senior, MC Pipe, and myself. My word, we could tell a few stories.
You mentioned tricky trainers. Well, a proper tricky trainer I read about in your book, Albert Davison. Can you give us a few stories? Tell us about him. One new one on me.
Albert. I used to in the Sun. I called him the Caterham Wizard. He was an extraordinary man. He always wore a flat cap, and he set horses up for gambles. Bad horses to win sellers, but his party trick was to win 2 races on the same day at a different track, and he pulled off the most amazing stunts. And he wasn't. He said to me once, he would never. A pressman walked towards him, he'd walk away, but he loved Chris Poole of the Standard and myself. For some reason, we were always together, and Plumpton, Fontwell, and Folkestone, and all the rest of it. So he liked us, and he said to me once, "Can I have a word?" And he said, "If you give me £2,000 each, you two, I'll train a horse for you under somebody else's name, and then within 4 years it'll run in a race, and you've got to put £5,000 on it between you, and those winnings are for me." Well, I was a bachelor, as stupid as anything, and I said to Pooley, I said, "This sounds a very great opportunity." And Chris was, dare I say, he wasn't rolling in cash, and he said, "Well, I can't afford it. You do it on your own." So I thought, well, I don't know. And I was seriously thinking about it. And then Chris said, "If you get found out, you know, the Jockey Club, they issue the press badges. And if you're found to have had a horse in training under somebody else's name, you'll lose your press badge. Then you'll lose your career, CD. You won't be on the Sun anymore, because that'll be the end of it." So I said to Albert, I said, "I'm afraid I'm waving the white flag here. I'm not bold enough. I'd love to do it." But he said, "That's all right, that's all right." Within about 4 years, he pulled off a sensational gamble in a cellar down at Folkestone. And I looked at him, and he knew exactly what I wanted to ask, and I didn't have the heart to do it. And he came up and he said, "That was the one." And I think it was 20-1 shot. So we'd have all been absolutely rolling in it. But he died, unfortunately. I mean, there can't all be the Cecils and Stouts and Cumanis of this world. There's got to be. I love the little guys, as I say. I don't like the silver spoon trainers. That's why I like, Elsworth. You know, born on a council estate in Salisbury or somewhere around there, and all the rest of it. I don't go for these people who are handed the job on a plate, because I certainly wasn't, you know. I've met some tremendous characters in racing. I was just so pleased that when I agreed to take the Murdoch bounty, that somebody told me that Paul Hannigan had lost the job as first jockey to Hamdan Al Maktoum. That's in 2006, the autumn. And I thought, and I've done this so many times in my life, dare I do this? If it's wrong? And being a professional, I thought, well, I've got to check. So I rang Angus Gold at Newmarket on the Friday, and I could see him on television answering my phone call. And I said, "Angus, Claude Duval." I said, "It's a tricky one, this." "Oh, Claude, anything I can do to help?" I said, "Paul Hannigan, is it true he's been sacked?" "What on earth made you think that?" So I said, "So you're saying no?" "You'll be made to look so silly if you write that." So I said, okay. And then I began to have self-doubt myself. And I rang another source in that Royal Blue Colours Syndicates circuit. And this chap said, how on earth did you find out about that? Well, that's all he had to say to me. I was, I lit the bloody bonfire by then. I was away. And it appeared, and Dave Cook, who was sports editor of The Sun, racing editor of The Sun, he put up a lovely saying, Hannah, gone, Gone, back page lead of our pullout, front page lead of our pullout. And even on the Saturday morning when I was sitting here in this very room, and I'm thinking, oh, poor man, I've destroyed this man's whole career, If it's not true, and nobody substantiated it, it's very hard on him, and it made me look a complete idiot. But I retired the next day. Well, of course, the Daily Mail, the Daily Mirror, all my so-called rivals, which I never accepted that they were within 100 miles, they all went bursting up to Angus School. Have you seen The Sun today? And, oh, where does he get this stuff from? Where did he get this story from? What an awful lot of rubbish. And they even approached the great Hamdan, the glum one, Claude Duval in The Sun, he's done this story and all the first I've heard of it and all the rest of it. And I was crucified. Racing Post knocked it down, they all knocked it down. And I thought, well, what a way to go out, CD. You've thrown this, what we call a kite in journalism. And anybody who's anybody in racing, they've all destroyed this story, and I'm leaving, very embarrassed about this. And I rang the person who told me originally, and he said, have faith, CD, have faith. And I said, all right. And I went to a lunch in London. That was on September the 23rd, that article appeared. I think it was on the 10th of November. There was a PA flash. And I was coming back from a lunch in London, and I saw it on my mobile. Hannigan contract cancelled. And I thought, thank God for that. And there's no better feeling in journalism to have had an exclusive splashed all over your paper, destroyed by all these so-called non-entities who knocked it down, and then with 3 weeks later, it's true.